Welcome to my tutorial for Bad Dudes for the NES. This was a game I rented a long time ago. I actually used a cheat code to beat it when I was younger just to see the game, and it seemed extremely difficult to me back then. But playing it now many years later, it was a moderately difficult game, but not too hard. It took me about an hour and 54 minutes to beat. But you have to ask yourself, are you a bad enough motherfucker to save the president? So don't even start the fucking game unless you have the answer to that question. Because, you don't want to go into this unprepared. It gets really fucking serious. So, yeah, you got your, your basic attacks. Whenever you get the nunchucks, that's what you're really going to want to really destroy the game. That really runs through enemies and bosses. So try to hold on to the nunchuck. You can carry it between stages. So you want to try to do that if you can. If you use the nunchuck while you're crouching, you'll strike much faster. So that's the recommended way to use it pretty much all the time. But yeah, to begin with, you're just going to be... I like to crouch and strike most of the enemies as it seems faster and they can't hit you with any high attacks. So you can also, if you punch rapidly, you'll deflect shurikens and shit like that. See, I deflected that without taking any damage. For the guys that jump up in the air with the swords, all you got to do is walk towards them and they'll jump over you, see, like that, and then get a few hits in. Usually I like to crouch and hit them, but sometimes the hit detection in this game is pretty fucking bad. It's a little bit of a sloppy, sluggish, kind of slow, responsive game, and the hit detection is not that good either. So, for this first boss, we're going to see the charge punch in action. What you do is you hold down the punch button, and you release it when you're flashing, and you'll do huge damage. And this is the best way, I think, to fight this guy. I didn't actually fight him this way in practice. Karnov, you'll recognize him from other games. I didn't fight him this way in practice, but when I did my full run, I decided to try it out, and it worked very well. So all you got to do is hit him with a charge punch, and then just walk back a little bit so his flame doesn't get you. Just do it as a precaution, and let him come back to you. Walk towards him and punch him again with another power punch. Now, if you ever do get cornered and you don't have time to charge your power punch, there's a very easy strategy. It's a kind of a cheap technique that I used on the final boss, but you don't really need to use it. But it definitely helps for close quarters situations. What you want to do is you hold down the punch button to charge your power punch, but instead of waiting, you just pause the game. And you continue holding down the punch button, and you wait a few seconds, then you unpause the game, and your punch will already be fully charged. So basically, you can charge up your power punches in a split second of actual game time because you're charging while the game is paused. And when you unpause, you release the punch. And you can use that to get multiple power punches in on a boss when your back is against the wall. You know what I mean? You don't have to have a lot of room because normally you would need to have enough space if the boss is walking towards you, and you're trying to charge. Because you can't jump and charge at the same time. If you jump, it cancels the charge. So you have to be able to, you need enough space to retreat and walk backward if you need to dodge. So with that technique, with that little trick, you'll make things a lot easier. I only ended up using it on the final boss, but you'll see it in action for the final boss. So this level is very easy. All you really have to do on this stage is, hopefully you still have the nunchuck. Actually, I recommend, if you died on the first stage at all, to just reset the game, since you'll just start back at the first stage. Because after you beat a stage, you earn an extra life. So it's not based on points, but whenever you complete a stage, you get an extra life. So if you were to have, say you died once or twice on the first stage, you'd be in this stage with, you might only have 2 lives or 1 life or something for this stage. I recommend trying to at least beat the first stage without losing a life because it's easy to do. And if you can, you want to get as far as you can like that because you can accumulate lives. I didn't lose my first life until kind of late game, and my continue lasted me to the very end of the game. But I did end up using 2 continues. But yeah, for this guy, hopefully you still have the nunchuck, and all you have to do is face the direction of him, and he'll just walk into your nunchuck. I like using rapid fire controller to have rapid fire set for the punch button, but sometimes I switch it off when I want to use the charge punch. So just be aware if you do use that. If you don't use it, then just mash the punch button. You'll pretty much get the same effect. You don't really need rapid fire for the game, but I like putting it on. I use it whenever I find it somewhat useful in the game. Yeah, for that previous level, it was just a matter of pivoting left to right as enemies approach you. From whatever, the enemies that are closest to you, you just want to turn around and hit them with the nunchuck. So you can just pretty much stay in one place until you need to jump between the transitions of the various trucks. There's little gaps you have to jump when the screen scrolls. But aside from that, you pretty much can just sit in one place on that truck and turn left and right and just hit the enemies. Whenever you destroy a red ninja, you'll get a pickup of some sort. Now, if you have the nunchuck, don't even touch the knife, because the nunchuck is way better. It has more range. The knife is good if you don't have anything else, but you really want to try to hold on to the nunchuck. The good thing about the red ninjas is you'll memorize where some of them spawn, and they'll drop soda cans that give you a lot of health back. To pick up an item, you press down and punch over the item, and you'll pick it up. To jump down, you hold press down, hold down and jump, and you'll jump down off of a platform. If you want to do a super high jump, you hold up and jump. That's to get up on higher platforms usually. But you don't really have much use for it aside from jumping to a higher elevation. See, like that, getting up to these ledges up higher, you'll hold up and jump. There is other moves. There's a spin kick move that if you hold one of the directions, either left or right, and then B and A at the same time, you'll do a spin kick. But I don't really like it. I didn't find a use for it. So you're not going to see me using that. I do use the charge punch, though, which I will be showing a lot. You'll see me use that a lot. Now for this, you're mainly just going to, take your time and just turn left to right to hit the enemies that approach you. Go underneath the jumping sword enemies. Now for this boss, it's very easy. Just keep a little bit of distance. And if you do it right, see, I should have been a little bit farther back, but if you do it right with the nunchuck, you won't even get hit. It's very easy. So once you clear out these ninjas, move in closer and get a few hits in on just the isolated ninja, because that's what damages them when you're hitting the single ninja. There's one single ninja that takes damage. The other ones are just clones that you need to destroy. But once you destroy them, he'll come up and you can just smash him around a little bit. See, if you have enough distance, they're all just going to get hit into your nunchucks and die. And this nunchuck trick works really well for a number of the bosses. It really exploits them. The ones that I don't use the nunchuck on, I use the power punch on. Now, I don't have any great methods for like all the bosses or anything, and a lot of them rely on using the nunchucks. So my strategies are going to be limited if you're not able to get to the bosses with the nunchucks. You do have about 3 or 4 continues if you lose all your lives. If you do lose a life, you'll start right where you died, but if you lose all your lives, then you will have to continue at the beginning of the stage. So this game does have limited continues, so you do have to, do fairly well. But if you lose a few continues, you'll still be able to beat the game. You don't have to play perfect. See, I went into this stage with 5 lives, so I was in good shape here. But then I started to fuck up a little later, and I wasn't able. I wanted to carry a bunch of lives to the final level to guarantee that I would win. But it didn't work out that way. But luckily, I practiced it decently enough. I did about an hour and 20 minutes practice session, where I just played through the game normally, and I made save and load states on some of the bosses just to practice them. Mainly the later bosses, because I beat the first 2 bosses pretty much right from the start. But I practiced some of the bosses with save and load states to make sure I had it down. And then I practiced the final stage, which I was able to practice all the bosses again on the final stage, because there's a boss rush where you have to fight all the bosses again, except they have a little bit less health. So I practiced some more with that, and then I just started the game over, and I was able to beat it on my first full attempt, but I did use 2 continues. I also reset a few times on the first stage, because like I said, if you die once on the first stage, you might as well reset, because you're going to be better off carrying in that extra life into the next level, because then you can go into level 2 with 3 lives. So it's a nice start. So yeah, if you didn't have the nunchucks, you can get them here from that red ninja. It wouldn't be too hard to get them, because it's not too hard to punch and kick your way up to this point in the level. You do have to get kind of far into this stage, because it's a longer stage. You have to get kind of far into it before you find the first red ninja that drops the soda can, which the soda cans are kind of what you want to live to, because if you can get to the soda can, you can keep yourself from losing a life. So here I'm trying to survive as long as I can and get that soda can pickup, because my goal was to try to to not lose any lives for as long as possible, so that I could carry over maybe 6 or 7 lives into the final stage. Of course, it didn't work out that way. I would have needed probably to practice more on some of the bosses to do that. I didn't really practice. I didn't practice fighting a lot of the bosses without the nunchuck, and sometimes it's hard to hold on to it for some of the later stages, for the bosses. But and I should have practiced that more. I would have done better. But I always recommend, playing on an emulator and using save and load states for any possible troublesome parts. And if you want to be extra careful, practice some of the bosses without the nunchuck and just see what method works for you. I don't have any good strategies for that because I didn't do that. But yeah, for this, you charge your power punches, and as he comes at you, punch him. But just be aware when he slows down and does his little spin somersault, he's going to do that drop kick, which has a lot of range. So just stay away from that when you see him somersaulting in the air. Other than that, he has a pretty short range punch that's very easy to avoid. You just want him to walk in your power punch. I did fuck up and lost a life, very sloppy, but there's no reason even to die on this guy unless you play as badly as I did. But I should have gone into that next stage with 6 lives, but I fucked that up. And remember, if you're getting cornered and you need to charge your punch faster, hold down punch, pause the game for about 3 seconds, and then release it, and you'll have the full charge. So you can fight yourself out of it. You can have your back directly against the corner and still fight your way out of it with that technique. Otherwise, if you don't know that trick, then you can get cornered by bosses and they can kind of destroy you. But that will get you out of that situation as long as you don't miss your shots. But if you do miss, you can hold punch, pause again immediately, and charge up again and try to land the next one. So there, this is very similar to the truck stage, but a little bit harder, I believe. It's a little bit more aggressive from what I remember, but it's the same kind of strategy that I use with pivoting left to right. But sometimes you get rushed from both ends, which it's tough not to lose a few lives on this stage. I didn't practice it enough to get good at it, so I think I kind of fucked up. See, those guys you want to do the high jump and jump over, but I didn't even see that guy. He came on the screen so fast. Of course, you could remember, I guess, when he's going to show up. I didn't have it memorized, so I do get hit by guys like that. Sometimes I just rush the screen. See, like that. That's kind of hard to remember where that is. But like I said, I don't have a lot of practice on the stages because when I practiced the game, when I did my practice run, I was mainly practicing like a few of the bosses. I didn't even really practice all the bosses that well. I mean, I mostly just practiced them with the nunchuck, but that's not really a good way to practice because a lot of times, you may get there without it if you die. So now you got Carniv again showing up. This time I did a different trick since there's enemies everywhere. I use my nunchuck and I just pivot left to right. I find that works very well. If you don't have the nunchuck, then you may want to use the power punch method, but it's going to be kind of hard, I think, with all the enemies jumping around. So I would just recommend not losing the nunchuck, But I don't really have a good strategy if you did lose the nunchuck, because I didn't practice that scenario. I just counted on having it. As with most of these tutorials, I have done a few tutorials where I actually practice segments very thoroughly and I just made them just as a purpose of a tutorial because I had already beaten the games in the past legit. So I would use save and load states to just practice sections and try to get the best runs on each section. I have done some of that. But most of my tutorials are going to be just me beating the game for my first time and then putting, editing out things like lost continues and then just, adding commentary and explaining what I did, what worked for me to beat the game, I don't I don't really try to find easy techniques for other players when I'm doing tutorials, unless I'm making a specialized tutorial like I've done a few times, But like Ninja Gaiden, I think Ninja Gaiden maybe 1 and 2 for NES, I did, tutorials where I kind of focus more on trying to get good footage of the fights, not just barely winning or anything. I think I refined those a little bit more because I had already beaten both of those games in the past. But this was me beating the game for the first time. Now, for this version, I did edit out the 2 continues that I lost and some of the resets I did on the first stage. If you want to see the full unedited run of that, it's about 40-something minutes with the continues used and the resets. I have that posted up as well. It just says Bad Dude's Unedited Playthrough. Now, for this guy, I didn't have a good strategy as of yet, except with the punch and kick to just kind of move with him as his body moves back, and then just use rapid punch. I was using rapid fire control and just moving with him, but it got very sloppy. I've done this better before, but that was my sloppy technique of not practicing enough without the nunchuck. On the last level, you'll see I found a much better way to play him using the power punches, but at this point I didn't know that technique. But I started to get less stubborn and decided to start playing around with the power punches on more of the bosses. So I played them a little bit differently at the end. They also have less health, so you don't have to fight them for as long. But you're still going to use the same strategies, pretty much, that you've been using. So yeah, main thing to watch out for here is these little falling spikes from the ceiling. You'll see them because they're isolated. They're usually floating in midair, and they're smaller than the longer icicles at the top. So just walk a little bit and let them fall first before you move forward. Actually, my main issue with this stage was these stupid fucking spike pits, because the control is so damn sluggish, you know, that in the end, I jumped into the fucking spikes, I think, once or twice, which I didn't even do that much in practice, but I remember I had to always play those parts carefully. I get a little tense around those parts because I always have a chance of fucking up the jump because it's so shitty control. I mean, it's not the worst control, but it's just slow and sluggish. It just doesn't feel right. You know, it's good enough, I guess. It's serviceable, but it's really not good. It's a pretty sluggish game, but, you know, it's not... I remember the game being much worse. I would say now that it's an okay game. It's decent. It's not bad. I remember it being a bad game because I had a lot of trouble with the control, and I was just a much worse player back then. So, I mean, of course, when a game seems super fucking hard and it kind of controls bad, you know, it's easy back then to dismiss it as just a bad game. But I guess I have more tolerance in some ways now. Just becoming a better player, you're able to tolerate certain shit easier without as much frustration. But I can still see that the controls are flawed, and, you know, it's still not a very good game. So that's the soda can for the stage. Hopefully you got this far without dying, so you can grab that and get your health mostly restored. It doesn't give you full life back, but if you're not missing too much health, you know, you'll get most of it back. It can keep you alive. And a lot of these enemies are the exact same, so that's why there's not a lot of new strategies, really. Now, these are the spike pits. These are very annoying. I mean, it's not really hard, but you have such a short jump. If you don't space right, you fall in. And there's a few of them in this stage. They're really not that hard, but, I mean, everything is more challenging when you have shitty controls. It's one of those kind of things. It's more of an annoyance because, you know, if you do fuck up and fall in there, it's not a one-hit kill, but it really drains your health bar if you don't get out in time. I mean, just hitting into it is not good, but you can still try to climb out and survive. But that's the main obstacle. The game is kind of unresponsive controls. You can't really turn and strike as fast as you would think. Probably because there's probably slowdown and shit at work, you know. So that's one of the issues. The main challenge, though, aside from that, if you're decent, I would say if you're a decent player at old school type of games, this is probably not going to be too hard for you. If you're not that experienced with these type of games, then obviously a lot of these games can be tough because, you know, you just don't have a lot of experience under your belt defeating these kind of games. So it's going to be new. But like when I was younger, like I said, this game was super hard for me. So I mean, I would rent it, but I could barely do anything in it. So. Now, of course, it was pretty painless for me. I did have to learn a few parts, but pretty standard. You know, it's more of a moderate challenge game for me these days. So, yeah, you see I fell in that bamboo pit and really fucked up with my health. And then I got really sloppy on this guy. See, I do the similar trick of punching and kicking him and moving with his body, but it didn't work well at all for me this time. And, you know, I really fucked it up. So this is not going to be the part where I can explain it too well because this was a shitty execution. See, I barely beat it, but I did get to the final stage without using a continue. So, I did well in that sense. But see, then I got to the end of this stage on 0 lives, I think, and then I died. So this stage wasn't too hard, but the boss rush at the end can be a little tricky. But I have strategies for that. So now I wasted I wasted 2 continues at this point on this final stage, and now this is my last continue where I beat it. So a lot of this stage is actually easier than some of the other stages as far as fighting your way through. I found it easier than a lot of the other stages. It's not as aggressive if you take your time. So the stage itself is an easier stage than some of the other ones, but the trade-off is that you have a boss rush, which if you don't have the nunchucks can be very, very hard. Unless you've practiced how to really fight the guys without the nunchucks. Like I said, I didn't have any strategies for that because I didn't really do that. But I do recommend, if you think you're going to have trouble getting the nunchucks to the bosses, you may want to practice the level and practice it fighting the guys just punch and kick. I would just recommend just learning how to play the stage, because the stage is not that hard. So I would recommend learning how to play the stage and bring the nunchucks to the bosses. That's what I recommend doing. I think that's a lot easier than trying to punch and kick your way through all the bosses, because they can be kind of, with the bad hit detection and everything, I think it's kind of a pain in the ass. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. I would recommend just learning how to see, because you get the nunchucks here about mid-level, so you will get the nunchucks. So they're always in the same spot. So I do recommend learning how to do it that way. If you do waste continues on the last level, if you've done as well as I did, then you will have like 3 or 4 continues to use on this last level. So if you waste a continue, you'll start at the beginning of the stage, but you'll have like 3 or 4 chances to bring your nunchuck to the final bosses. So if you happen to fuck up and lose all your continues doing that, then I would recommend practicing the stage more with save and load states and making sure you got it down better, and then start the game over, obviously, and you should do better next time. But use save and load states to practice any parts that you're not doing well at or you're not efficient at. You know what I mean? If you find that you're playing parts really sloppy and draining lives, those are the parts you want to practice with save and load states. That's the real good way to master a game. If you really want to break a game down piece by piece, and then when you play it, everything comes together because you practiced everything efficiently. And that's what I do with save and load states, and I've used that to beat some of the hardest games like Super Smash TV on Super Nintendo, Gym Power. I mean, many, many, many games. So, hundreds of games since I learned that technique and started using it. In Gym Power for Super Nintendo, my tutorial for that, I break down my save state technique in a lot more detail. A really efficient way to practice. Now here I was waiting around for this red ninja to appear. I can't always get it to appear. I don't know what makes it appear. I wanted the red ninja to appear because it gives you health back, but I don't think it ended up showing up. So if it doesn't show up, just go on about your regular business. You can do charge punches while carrying the nunchuck, so do that again. Use the pause method if you need to charge faster, but these are the same bosses we fought, Karnov and this guy, so use the charge punches to take these guys out. They take less hits this time, so it's a faster fight. But see, if you get cornered like that, it can be dangerous. I was able to get myself out of it with a nunchuck slap, but it was getting a little close there. I didn't have to use the pause technique, but I was about to. Yeah, so now this is the final boss rush already began. You had Karnov, you had that guy. And now you're gonna fight all the bosses again. So now this guy, hopefully you still have the nunchuck. It's a very, very easy defeat. That's why I recommend holding on to that nunchuck for the whole stage. That's really my strategy. Without that, my tutorial's kind of useless because that's what I relied on. So yeah, get a little distance like usual. Same shit. Same boss fights. They're just easier versions of what you already fought. They have less health, but they do all the same shit. So you'll just kill them faster. It doesn't show their health bars this time. I guess they're considered regular enemies now, but they take less hits than they did initially. The final boss is very, very fucking easy with the charge punch technique with the pause, by pausing the game. If you don't want to play it that way because you think it's cheap, then what you can do is I think you can jump down off the helicopter if you need some space and then jump back up again and charge your punch again. But I didn't do that. For this guy, I just pretty much used my charge punches. I just walked in when I could and got the punch in. I didn't really have a method to dodge him much. I just kind of walked towards him and punched him with the power punches. And I took some hits. I didn't have him down too well, as you can see. But I only took a few hits. It was easy enough with the power punches. I didn't even use power punches on him in practice. But then for these two guys, I decided, fuck it, I'm going to try power punches because I don't know how to fight those guys with the nunchucks, really. You know what I mean? So I went the power punch method. Now, I found this guy harder to land the power punches on because he's a little faster. But I got into a rhythm after a little while. I did lose a life. So it wasn't great. I really don't show any great way to fight this guy at any point in the tutorial. I had better runs with him in practice, but where I just punched and kicked his body and moved with him like I did with the other boss. But it wasn't reliable enough, really. So yeah, for this guy, very easy. Jump up on the helicopter immediately. Charge your punch, release on him, and do again. You see, now I paused the game because I didn't have enough time to charge. But see, I'm pausing it again. You can't hear the pause sound, but I'm pausing the game. That's why everything is freezing. So hold punch, pause the game for a few seconds, release, and then you have a fully charged punch. And just keep repeating that. And the boss will not be able to beat you that way. It's very easy if you do that. You just stand in one place. And, it is hard sometimes to have enough time to charge your punch without pausing the game, but it can be done. But you may have to jump down off the helicopter occasionally. And if you do jump off the helicopter to get some space, watch out for his bullets. He fires a spread shot down, but I didn't even really try that, so I don't have a lot of tips on fighting him off the, of like dodging his moves off the helicopter. I think he just shoots a spread shot. But basically, you're just going to stand up there and power punch him with the pause button. That's what I recommend. So yeah, congratulations. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for watching.